Shabbat, Shalom. Hello, everyone. Um, I'm going to use an outline that'll help me stay on topic and keep me from going all over the place. It's a habit I've had since I was a kid when I would talk about things and start in one subject and go into another. Um, so I've always had to keep focus and, give myself soft prompts. And when that didn't work, or say I forgot about it, didn't do it, I would usually have people around me that would be like, hey, what are we talking about here? Get back on point. So this is just me being open, um, being brutally honest, just to let everybody know, hey, nobody's perfect, especially me. And it doesn't matter how you get to the truth, is that you get to it and live your life in it. This is going to be a testimony, a story of brief childhood and military background, but how I came back to the Most High and began to walk with Christ in the way that He walked when He was on this earth, by obeying the Sabbath, following the feast days, and continue along with the law, statutes, and commandments. Unfortunately, it was taught by design that the commandments were done away with a new testament. But, when you translate everything from Greek instead of Hebrew, you could get testament, which isn't even the right word. It's covenant. And the only difference with the covenant, as most of us know now, is that He would put the laws, statutes, commandments, feasts, all of that. He's going to put it in your heart, so that you will have, I would say, the moral obligation more than what our ancestors had when they just, clubbed all week, went to the synagogue on Saturdays, brought an offering, and walked away as if they were blameless, and still ran right back into sin again, which is how the Deuteronomy 28 curses affected the children of Israel, the children of the light, the Negroes who are not from Ham, but are from Shem, and not to be mistaken with those that hail from, I would say, Poland, that are actually Khazarians, and are also of the seed of Japheth as Ashkenaz. So even coming into that understanding was kind of a blow. It wasn't a surprise, but a blow to me, considering the things that I did as a child and where the people I love worked. I volunteered in Candy Striped at a Hebrew and geriatric nursing home, same place where my mom worked for over 25 years. And during the candy striping, there was a man by the name of Mr. Shapiro that would often speak with me and impart some words of wisdom. In one of our conversations, he had told me that it was some things that I would do when I got older that would make sense about what I was seeing now, and that I would probably do something pretty special. I didn't know how to take it. Obviously, it was something that stuck with me, but I didn't know how to take what he was saying, or really what he wasn't saying. Because of the dynamics of my family, I mean, now knowing in blood and seeing that some of my blood relatives look completely Caucasian, but as far as grandparents were concerned, my grandfather was pretty bright, and I guess younger on, he could even pass off for a mulatto, even though I've come to understand that he wasn't. He wasn't even half. But, we know that Negroes can pretty much show and make any type of shade. So I shouldn't be surprised that, he walked around with, green or gray eyes, light color hair, and a skin tone of like a number 2 pencil. That being said, let me go ahead and dig in. Just to give you a quick childhood background, I was very inquisitive before I could walk. By the time I was able to walk, I was already taking things apart. And I got a knack for taking apart locks. I was considered Keyhole Sam, was a nickname for me. Just boredom and just puzzles. I just looked at things as puzzles, and if I didn't have toys, it was books or things to take apart. I always had a lot of questions, and I really didn't get that much answers from my peers, cousins, brothers, things of that nature. And it was hard really getting full answers from my aunts and uncles. Uncles were a lot easier to understand and get information from. For me, it was always going to the older people. I say 60s and up, because a lot of times they tell you how they saw it, and they can tell you from experiences they had. Here I am, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and these people have lived 6, 7, and 8 times longer than I have. So it's obvious that they're a wealth of knowledge and like a walking library. So I picked their brains. I had an issue. I've always had an issue with being lied to. Main reason is I tend to be able to see and feel when people are lying to me right off the bat. I just don't say much to them. I usually let them talk. But as I've gotten older, it's been harder for me to allow these type of things to go on and me not to just call it for what it was. I don't know why a lot of people do it. I know as a kid, I started lying because the adults, when I would tell them certain stories and things that I was dealing with, they couldn't handle the truth. And they would just flat out deny it and tell me I was lying. So I just said, you know what? Since I'm lying, then I'll just make the greatest and biggest stories that you'll believe. And it worked. It worked. Quite a few years. It wasn't until I got into my teenage years where it was biting me in the butt, because my friends and cousins alike, when I would go see them and go over and play with them, and when trouble would come up, they just point the finger to me. And because my mom was already telling everybody I was lying all the time, hey, wasn't nobody gonna believe me. So I just got sick of being a scapegoat for a lot of things that I wasn't. I take responsibility for what I did. I was always accountable for what I did. But, I just didn't like being blamed for things that weren't me. So I had to change that and just start telling the truth and not caring if somebody liked it or not, or if they didn't believe it. I'm still going to tell the truth. So I started doing that in my teenage years. That was something that I had to change, whether it was a learned behavior or not. I knew it was wrong, and I needed to change it. Basically, adults didn't want to engage with stories, and didn't believe what I said. It would be trying to explain sometimes my daily experiences or even my dreams. I come to find out, talking to a lot of people, it's a lot of folks that saw shadows in their room, grays, had issues with what is called the witch riding your back, where they wasn't able to breathe, wasn't able to move, but they were wide awake, maybe able to move their eyes and their head, but they felt pressure on them where they just could not move. I couldn't understand it. Again, I was a kid. So, I tell my mom, say, hey, I've seen this, I dealt with this, and like, no, that's just a dream, this is that, whatever. So, why keep going back and saying something if it's nonchalant and not believed? To the point that My mother had to find out from my downstairs neighbor that during the time that I would come home from school and be just between the time my mom would be getting off work and come home, I had started jumping out my second story window, either into trees or into the bushes. And when my mom found out about it, let's just say she went through the roof. But when I told her what the reason for it, being dreams that I had someone chasing me and I wasn't going to be able to get out through the ground floor and I had to run upstairs and jump out of a window. And me being the perfectionist that I kind of became as a kid, I had to learn it, and I had to get over any fear I had of heights because I felt like it was something that was going to come down the pike later. Now, quick backstory on that, I found out from one of my grandmothers that she has premonitions or visions, deja vu, and had them since she was a child. But she learned how to deal with them, and she told me, not to be afraid of it. They happen, they come and go. See what you can learn from them, or whatever you change if something comes up. You just be prepared for it. But don't make a big deal out of it. And I was probably around maybe 9 or 10 when I asked her, and she told me that. And after that, I didn't have much to say on it. I didn't know I had other people in my family that had the gift, whether it was aunts or even my father, until later. But let's say that type of awareness for a kid can be good and bad. And for me, I definitely tried to use for the good, but like I said, the bad part of it is a lot of times you start relying on, the more you have them, the more premonitions you have, you start relying on them, which is never good. So just going forward with that, I had questions all of the time about things that didn't make sense, both in school and literature that I saw was confusing. Whether it was math, that I always had a good knack of doing it in my head, but it just didn't seem right when I wrote it out. I could never write it out as fast as I could think of it. Again, I had these questions about my dreams, and I would ask church leaders, priests, all through the Baltimore area. And I couldn't understand why none of these people could or would even attempt to answer my questions, whether using Bible or other sources. And upon moving out of the inner city, staying mainly in North Avenue area, West North Avenue, moved out briefly to Middle River. And I just happened to move next door to a man who knew about issues with dreams and had an affiliation with the Catholic Church. It wasn't until after taking a trip with him to a monastery in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, to be able to have access to books that talked about dreams and, in aspect, dream demons, naming them, what they were and what they were doing. And it kind of helped me understand, but that just shows the extreme that I was willing to go for understanding information that I just couldn't get on a regular Enoch Pratt free library or thing like that. Like I said, come to find out, the dude not only was a pedophile, but I had a dream about him. And when I talked to him about it and explained everything that I saw in it and where and how I saw him, he was open and honest with me and said, yes, this is what I've been dealing with for some time, and I'm dealing with it, I'm fighting it. I had the dreams, and sometimes I don't feel like I'm in control of myself. And I mean, 15-year-old kid, I kind of took it as that. I went up to the place with him. I talked to a few of the monks, and then I asked could I go to the library where they kept all the information. Went there. I was down there by myself. I went through a few books and definitely got the understanding that I needed. But let's just say it wasn't too much longer after that. after getting through those things, that I got kind of spooked while down there, noises, cold air, things like that. I just knew to move into areas that was better supervision when things like that happen. And I'm sure people can understand why. I wound up having to barricade my door that night because the man kept trying to get in my room. Again, come to find out, he was a pedophile, and that was the best way I could protect myself with that. Of course, after I got back from the trip, talked to my mom about it, how they'd even propositioned me to take his vehicle, his Jeep, if I would just, do anything with him that I felt comfortable with. Obviously, I didn't feel comfortable. I let my mom know, and she said a few things and stopped dealing with him. Before I knew it, I believe he moved away, or I think we had moved to a house around the corner. Anyway, again, this was something that I did because the Christian church wasn't answering me. One of the major churches that I wound up attending, where I thought I would get good information from, was Bethel AME. And let's just say I came to find out between then and then now, after coming back to Baltimore after a few years, the same people that were in charge of the church were the same people that were in charge of the churches that I was around throughout my military career. They were also the same people that were stifling my promotion and plagiarizing my my work and taking it as theirs. And they were, Masons, Eastern Stars, or Greek fraternities or sororities, or what you would call boule. And it was a good old boy system. See, at first I thought the good old boy system was just a racist thing in the military. But I got to find out for myself, it wasn't that we're racist in the military. I came across quite a few that openly said what they had to say. And I was fine with it. You can carry hate in your blood. I don't have to. However, if they ever felt they had issue, and it was something that I wound up doing up until about my 18th or 19th year in, then there's the tree line, there's the bosun locker, and there's closed doors. And where I was brought up in the military, it was, you got a problem with somebody, you handle it like a man. Obviously that culture changed and it became everybody wanted to do paperwork, but I always had a habit of pissing off my leaders, especially when I would show them paperwork that showed otherwise of what they were teaching us, that contradicted what they were telling me to do or what they had me doing with my subordinates. And to not cause issue, I wouldn't do it in front of my people, but I go to their office or I go to my office and I speak clearly of what I saw. Most times it just drew their ire and it'd be, maybe they yell at me or shout at me, whatever. But every now and then I had somebody that was froggy enough to put their hands on me. It was always bad for business for them. And it didn't matter who it was, officer, fellow petty officers, or especially chiefs. I actually had one that I had to throw over my desk in my office because he put his hands on me while he was cursing and spitting. I gave him every opportunity. I stepped back, walked away, and told him not to put his hands on me. He did it anyway. So he got thrown. Trying to stay back on topic because, again, it's just a lot of stuff that I really could not vent about pretty much once I passed my 6th year in the military, because my leaders were violating my HIPAA, and they were going to my therapist, and trying to use information that I would give them about the things that I was dealing with to stifle my promotion, to use against me. So I had a habit very early on in my career that I had to continue, which was confiding in the chaplain, knowing how much to say or what to say that won't force them to have to say anything to my leadership. But at the same token, a lot of times the chaplains were also working as far as equal opportunity and semio. So I would get caution on what I needed to do to further protect myself or continue just doing my job. For me, it was never about trying to get anybody in trouble and worrying about what everybody else was doing. To me, I just knew I had a job to complete. Um, and I needed to take care of that. And my job mainly was doing stuff for others and serving others, serving my subordinates. Yeah, I was leadership, and I worked for leadership. But I'm gonna tell you this: you do not lead from standing in the front with a big chest and acronyms, um, proposing you're the best. You learn from the trenches. You learn from some of the best and most talented people. And some of those folks that I found out throughout my life weren't people that could test very well. They were people that they were brilliant hands-on in whatever they did. They just couldn't put it all together on paper. And those were the people that I held a lot of value with. It didn't matter if they were seasoned vets or they were brand new in. I learned from anybody, young or old. If you don't think you can learn from anybody, then you stifling your own personal growth. In a lot of ways, you stifle your spiritual growth when you continue to keep narrow views about anything, and not open your mind and expand your horizons. The other thing too is I realized throughout my life that I've always had a stronger faith than a lot of people that I dealt with. I've never understood why, but I'll be honest with you. I've always believed I could do anything through Christ who strengthens me. And I really ran with that as a mantra. People would say, you can't do this, you can't do that. I always thought, hey, as long as I pray about it, as long as I read about it, and I pay attention, I can do it. So, yeah, I was able to do quite a few things from childhood and the military that usually would require full degrees, 4-year, 6-year, 8-year, and further education. And I was able to do a lot of those things based on my trustworthiness, my showing an understanding of the knowledge, and the fact that I would really do the research to be able to do things. And of course, the major thing is you humble yourself. Again, I learned from some of my subordinates 2 and 3 ranks below me on how to do certain things and deal with certain situations. And if I didn't humble myself, I wouldn't learn anything. Nobody's going to teach you or want to teach you anything in any area of life if you walk in there like you know everything because of having some acronyms on your chest. I watched it throughout my career, especially with doctors that wind up really not knowing their anatomy so well and had to deal with peer reviews all the time. You know, people knew where I worked. And so, a lot of folks know exactly who or what I'm talking about. But, again, these were things that I had to deal with that coincided along with my childhood within the military. So it made it difficult for me to speak to a lot of folks, and I had to compartmentalize. Now I'll get to the reason for that before I get further into and tell you exactly how it was that I started coming back to Christ and an understanding of who I truly am in Him. So again, I told you a lot of stuff that happened childhood and going into my military career. I guess to understand me further as far as my childhood was concerned, I was accepted to the GATE program probably before I got to middle school. I could have moved up a couple grades early on for testing high. I want to say when I was in kindergarten, I could have moved up to first and or second grade. My mom didn't think I was going to be mature enough to handle moving up early. To be honest with you, I know that I was too naive, not necessarily mature. I just didn't understand people. And if, a young-minded person like me going to any institutions with adults probably would have been disastrous because at the time it wasn't so much following everybody, but it was just trying to understand and being very, very gullible. So for that decision, I'm very thankful. And holding me right where the rest of my peers were kind of helped me to stay humble. Definitely as a child. By the time I was in the 7th grade, I had a 12th grade in math and reading level. I had turned down multiple scholarships to private schools. One in particular was to McDonough. Reason being, I always had a problem with bullies since I was a child. Always. I was nerdy, asked questions, and annoying to a lot of people. So I was bullied quite a bit. I knew the bullying would change if I went to McDonough because it was a predominantly white school. Difference being, fighting black kids, defending myself against black kids, and suspension and even expulsion, but not going to jail or juvie. I knew if I got in trouble for defending myself, fighting, whatever, with those white kids, I wasn't going to get a fair shake. And when I talked to the representative that was doing the offering in the interview, that's one of the things I asked him. And he said, well, no, you just can't get in fights. I said, so I'll be right back in the same book where I'd been before, where I was forced to let people hit me and bully me just so I would stay out of trouble. And for me, I couldn't go there because I knew I wasn't going to be able to not speak and not defend myself, regardless of who they were. So yeah, I turned that down, and I continued going to William H. Lamel prior to going to Dunbar. Again, excuse me, because I really want to try and stay on topic and keep it short. I did decide against taking my GED earlier. It was something I was thinking about doing when I was about 14. Thinking about taking my GED, getting out of school, and becoming an emancipated minor so I could do what I wanted to do. But I decided against that, which was definitely smart. In hindsight, it was smart. At the time, I didn't realize the implications if I had done it. Pretty much going from there, I wound up getting into the 10th grade, and I think I want to say is when I started seeing the recruiters around the school. With all the stuff that I did as a kid, jumping out of windows, hopping fences, climbing balconies on second and third story, fourth story. With my adventures, I had a few falls. Some of those falls, I knocked myself clear out, just out. Even as silly and stupid as playing with a soaked up bathtub bottom or surface and sliding back and forth for that. I was 6 or 7 years old. Lost my footing, caught the back of my head on the lip of the tub, and it was light when I went to sleep. It was dark when I woke up. My mom was trying to find me in the house, and luckily all the water was going out the tub. But when I finally heard it and got up, I just had a really, really bad headache. And I was kind of seeing stars and rainbows, man. So laid down. Didn't realize at the time what it was that I had a concussion. And let's just say that I started having migraines from that point on. So you take that further, let's say 4th grade, I was still dealing with headaches here and there. But at the same time, I was bored at school. I was extremely bored. So it was the 4th grade that I started cutting school. Just sometimes stupid stuff like hanging around school grounds and getting caught. Sneaking back home, sneaking over to a friend's house, going and hanging out downtown or out in the park. Again, it was hard staying challenged at school because of, we had pretty big classes and you had a lot of students. And I wasn't the only kid that had some sort of brightness in the room. What I always seemed to find out that sometimes I'd be the dumbest smart guy in the room. Came across quite a few brilliant people that were not only in the gifted and talented program with me, but I mean, we're talking about folks that are scholars right now. We're talking people that are literally Rhodes scholars, teachers of advanced math, and even owning their own business teaching children and adults advanced math. Some folks were tradesmen and went straight into business for themselves, things that they learned from their family. But I ran into a bunch of folks that were extremely smart, and I was just happy to be around them and learn with them. Every now and then I try to, put my hand up and think I knew a little something. Man, let me tell you, I was always pleasantly surprised when I had other people around me that were way smarter than me. Let's just say it kind of helped me feel normal in the community, and even within my own family, where I've always felt like the odd one out, except with the older people. Mainly like my grandmother, my uncles, definitely my Uncle Waddy, even my Aunt Pearl. But like my grandmother Mary, and also with my grandfather William, even my great grandfather Mr. Cross, down there in Virginia. I would just love sitting down and listening to whatever he had to say. Playing with the animals on his farm, being out there with nature. That dude he was just a really nice old soul. And just being around him, I don't know what it was, man. I don't know. Yeah, I've always valued the elderly. One, because they've been through it all, they've seen it all, and they still standing. Regardless of whatever they went through, they were still there. And the folks that were elder in my family, they took care of their families. Men and women that worked hard constantly and sacrificed many things for themselves to make sure that we had good. From owning farms to working in steel for 30 years and then working in food distribution for another 25 years was my grandfather William. The grandfather on my mom's side, he was a business owner. He learned under some folks as far as how to work with and deal with furs and leathers, and then he branched out on his own and opened the first black furrier business in Baltimore City. Bringing it to the Negroes and African Americans, if you want to call them that, throughout the city, so they have something cheaper, but in good quality, to be able to have to say it was their own. He also ran a cleaners and laundromat,